Woman, just die already! This house doesn't need you anymore!
If you're still here, please stay for a few more seconds. Tragedy doesn't happen in one day. It's built from years of silence. No pain ever gives someone the right to violence. And no one should ignore another person's suffering. Sometimes in life, not choosing is already the wrong choice. This story takes place in a quiet town in the United States where families look normal on the outside, until the door closes. If this story made you think, please subscribe to the channel. This channel tells stories about family, about choices, and about moments you can never undo. Subscribe and listen until the end, because sometimes one story can change a life. That day, he came home earlier than usual, no warning. No missed calls, no clear reason he could name. Just a vague feeling, thin, persistent, clinging to him all afternoon. It wasn't loud, it wasn't panic. Just enough to make his hands tighten around the steering wheel, and in one brief, unthinking moment, he turned onto the familiar road leading home. While the sun was still hanging low above the rooftops, the street was strangely quiet. A light breeze passed through. Everything looked normal, unsettlingly so. The gate was ajar, unlocked. That small detail slowed him by half a step. His family never left the gate open at this hour. He walked into the yard, his footsteps echoing dryly against the cold tiles. No one there, no voices, no television noise. And then the smell hit him, sharp, acrid, punching straight into his lungs like a sudden blow. He froze. It wasn't burnt food, not overheated oil or something forgotten on the stove. This smell was different, deeper, heavier. A scent the human body recognizes only when it's forced to remember. Burning hair, damaged skin, the smell of pain. His stomach clenched. From somewhere inside the house, very faint, very fast, a sound rang out. Metal striking something hard. Not loud, but sharp, like a warning that came too late. Then came a scream, short, choked, crushed between a throat and fear. His heart slammed so hard his ears rang. In that instant, every thought dissolved. No analysis, no reason. Only raw instinct driving him forward, breath quickening, deeper into the house he had lived in for years, yet had never felt so foreign. The hallway was darker than he remembered. Light from the far window stretched warped shadows across the walls, like shapes crawling forward. Each step matched a heartbeat. Each heartbeat carried a question he wasn't ready to name. He was close to the kitchen now. The smell grew stronger. The air hotter, the silence heavier. An unnatural silence, the kind that exists only right before everything collapses. He stopped at the doorway. In that moment, he hadn't seen anything yet. Didn't know what was waiting on the other side. But somewhere deep inside, he already understood. There are doors that, once crossed, leave no path back to who you used to be. He took a deep breath, then stepped inside. And at that very moment, an irreversible instant quietly opened itself, waiting. The kitchen was darker than usual. Not because night had fallen, but because of the smoke. Thick, heavy smoke rolled up from the stovetop like a brooding cloud, clinging to the ceiling, the walls, every breath. The weak yellow light was torn into trembling fragments, warping everything it touched, making the room feel distorted and unfamiliar, as if the kitchen itself had been drained of its soul. On the gas stove, a cast-iron pan sat crooked, glowing red like live embers. The oil inside boiled violently, bubbles bursting again and again, releasing a sharp, impatient sound like anger left on the fire for far too long. The mother stood backed against the sink. Her spine was bent more than usual, as though in just a few short minutes age had pressed an unbearable weight onto her shoulders. Her trembling hands gripped the edge of the cold stainless steel basin, fingers pale from the strain. Her silver hair was in disarray, strands slick with sweat and smoke, clinging helplessly to her forehead. Those eyes that had watched her son grow up, that had stayed open through nights of fever, that had quietly swallowed tears when the family faced hardship, were now wide with fear. Not the fear of death, but the fear of betrayal inside the very home she had spent her entire life protecting. Standing opposite her was the daughter-in-law. The young woman stood upright and steady, as if her feet were rooted deep into the tile floor. Her face showed no expression, no trembling, no hesitation. Firelight from the stove reflected across her cheekbones and into her eyes, casting flickering highlights, but offering no warmth. Instead, it made her gaze even colder, sharper, and utterly empty. Both hands gripped the handle of the pan, not the stance of someone cooking, but of someone delivering a sentence. "Stop pretending to be weak." Her voice cut through the narrow space, sharp as a freshly honed blade. Not loud, no need to shout. Each word fell with deliberate weight, like invisible blows. "For decades, you've tormented me enough." The words hung in the heated smoke. No one interrupted. No one argued back. The pan continued to boil, the oil snapping and spitting tiny sparks, as if it were agreeing with the rage being unleashed. The mother shook her head. The movement was slow, fragile, as if any stronger motion would cause her to shatter where she stood. Her dry lips trembled. It took a long moment before sound finally escaped, distorted and unsteady. "I only ask you." She paused to breathe. "Please stop." Not an order, not an accusation, just the raw plea of an elderly woman who had reached the very end of her endurance. But in the eyes of the woman facing her, there was no hesitation. Only fire. Not the flames on the stove, but a fire that had smoldered for a long time, fed by unspoken resentment, unacknowledged wounds, and years of believing she had been crushed while no one stood on her side. The pan tilted slightly. The oil screamed louder. And in that moment, the kitchen, once a place of gathering, of warm meals, of quiet laughter in the evenings, was no longer a home. It became a narrow battlefield, where a fragile plea was powerless to extinguish the hatred boiling over, surging, waiting to cross the final line. Time seemed to slow down. Not the kind of slow measured by a clock, but a warped, suffocating slowness where every sound stretches unnaturally, every movement becomes heavy, and the human mind clings desperately to tiny details, trying to understand what is about to happen, even though it already knows it cannot be stopped. The air in the kitchen was thick and oppressive. Smoke hung in place like a gray curtain, blurring every path of escape. The ceiling light flickered, its reflection dancing across the boiling oil in quivering, eye-straining flashes. His wife lifted the pan. No trembling hands. No hesitation, not even the faintest sign of doubt. The motion was chillingly precise, as if it had been rehearsed in her mind hundreds of times, waiting only for the right moment to be completed. Her fingers clenched the handle until they turned white, but her wrist was steady, unwavering. In that brief instant, he saw everything. Not with his eyes, but with something deeper. He saw years of silence piling up, words swallowed whole, grievances no one ever asked about. All of it converged, condensed into a glowing, molten object now being raised in the center of the kitchen. Then, bam! The sound exploded dry, brutal, unlike anything he had ever heard. Not just metal striking flesh, but the sound of a boundary being shattered. The red-hot pan slammed straight into his mother's face. In an instant, a sickening sizzle erupted. Her gray hair caught fire, curling violently as if twisted by an unseen hand. The flame flared and died just as quickly, leaving behind thick black smoke that surged upward, carrying with it a suffocating stench: burnt hair, damaged skin, the smell of pain beyond words. The odor flooded the kitchen, crushing his chest, turning every breath into torture. His mother collapsed. Her knees hit the floor first, then her entire body crumpled down. Her shaking hands clutched her face as if trying to shield what could not be protected. A scream tore out of her, warped, broken, stripped of language, reduced to the raw, primal sound of agony and terror. The sound slammed into the walls and ricocheted back, striking him full force, and in that moment, stop! His voice ripped through the space like a blade slicing through a nightmare. It wasn't planned. It wasn't measured. It burst from the deepest part of his chest, where the last remnants of instinct and protection were thrashing in desperation. His wife spun around. Her eyes met his, and in that instant, he realized what chilled him more than the flames themselves. There was no fear, no regret, only a heavy emptiness, as if everything had already ended before he ever stepped into that kitchen. The pan slipped from her hands. It hit the floor with a dull clang, rolled a few inches, then lay still, cooling, lifeless. Yet that small sound echoed endlessly in his mind like the final slam of a door he would never be able to open again. From that moment on, he understood. There was no gray area left. No more avoidance. No place to stand in between. That instant had forced him to choose. There were no more screams. The kitchen sank into a heavy silence, broken only by ragged breathing colliding with smoke-stained walls. The burnt stench still hung in the air, sharp, bitter, clinging to the lungs like an unspoken accusation. The flames were gone, but their aftermath remained hot, searing, unwilling to fade. He rushed forward, no thinking, no hesitation. He dropped to his knees, trembling arms wrapping around his mother. Her body felt terrifyingly light, as if letting go for even a second might cause her to disappear. The blistered skin along her cheek and forehead was dark red, slick with sweat. Her breathing was fractured short, shallow each breath, a struggle to remain alive for one more second. "Mom. Mom." His voice was hoarse. She didn't answer. Only stirred faintly, a weak reflex that proved she was still there, so fragile it made his chest tighten. Behind him, a sob broke free. His wife stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, hands covering her face, shoulders shaking in waves. Tears fell onto the tile, mixing with oil and smoke, smearing together until it was impossible to tell where the tears ended and the remnants of rage began. "You have to understand me," she cried, her voice shattered. "She never treated me like a daughter, not once." The words hung in the air, waiting for sympathy, for a nod, for a belated miracle that might undo everything. But when he turned to look at her, what appeared on his face was not anger, nor hatred. It was painful clarity, the kind that arrives too late after every boundary has already been crossed. He looked at the woman who had once been his wife for a long time, as if seeing her truly for the first time. No veil of good memories, no familiar excuses. Only the bare, cold truth standing in the middle of a kitchen that was no longer a home. He spoke slowly, one word at a time, each one landing heavily. You're allowed to resent, a breath. You're allowed to hate. He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. But you don't have the right, his voice dropped, to burn my mother alive. The kitchen went completely still. No more crying. No more justifications. Only the truth maimed at last, sharp as a blade, impossible to take back. He turned away, carefully helping his mother to her feet, one arm wrapped around her back, the other gripping tight, as if loosening even slightly would cause her to fall. Every step was a trial. Every step was a goodbye left unspoken. He opened the door. Didn't look back, didn't wait. Light from outside flooded in, slicing the smoke-filled kitchen into two distinct halves, inside and out, before and after. When the door closed behind him, the sound was soft but final, and with it, a family closed as well. The hospital was cold and white. Not the gentle white of morning sunlight, but the indifferent white of ceramic tiles, fluorescent lights, and walls that had witnessed so much pain they no longer reacted to it. The scent of antiseptic lingered in the air, seeping into every breath, slowing emotions down, forcing them to tread carefully. He sat beside the hospital bed. His mother lay still, much smaller than she was in his memory. White bandages covered half her face, hiding the worst of the damage, but not the fragility revealed in every breath she took. Her chest rose and fell softly, steady, but weak as if a slightly stronger gust of wind could make it stop. He held her hand, thin, cold, fingers rough with age, the same hand that had once cradled him when he was newborn, held his tightly while crossing busy streets, quietly placed bowls of rice outside his room when he was angry and refused to eat. Now that hand rested in his unbearably light. His mother opened her eyes, slowly, with effort. Her time-clouded gaze searched for him for a moment, then settled. A faint smile appeared at the corner of her lips, weak, but painfully familiar. I'm sorry. Her voice was barely a whisper, broken. For making you suffer. He shook his head, throat tightening. It took several seconds before he could squeeze her hand more firmly, a promise without words. No, Mom. He swallowed hard. I'm the one who should be sorry. He lowered his head, his forehead nearly touching the back of her hand. I'm sorry, his voice cracked, for coming home too late. Outside, at the far end of the long, sterile hallway, a woman stood still. She leaned against the wall, arms hanging loosely at her sides, her empty eyes staring into nothing. No one approached her. No one called her name. No one addressed her with the word family anymore. Nurses, doctors, other patients' relatives passed by. Everyone moved past her as if she didn't exist. And perhaps, in that moment, she finally understood what loss truly meant. Not losing a person, but losing the right to remain. The hospital room door was left slightly ajar. He didn't turn his head toward the hallway, not out of resentment, but because there was nothing left to hold on to. Some choices once made quietly close off every other path. The afternoon passed slowly. The last sunlight of the day filtered through the small window, settling gently on the white sheets, on his mother's silver hair, on the two hands still clasped together. No one spoke another word. Yet within that silence, for the first time in many years, he felt his heart finally grow still. That day he went home. Not to the old house with smoke-stained walls and shattered memories, but to a new place where he understood that returning is not always about reunion. Sometimes returning is about facing the truth, about accepting it, and about ending something. Not the end of a marriage, but the end of a mistake that had lasted a lifetime. And in that final stillness he knew, this time he had truly come home.